I'm Hilary Jeffkins, as Stu has introduced, and I am a producer, a natural history wildlife producer. Next slide, please. I work for a company called Silverback Films. I thought I would put into context the story of Wild Isles. So Silverback Films is a company based in Bristol. Bristol is a hub for natural history filmmaking. Many of you may know that the Natural History Unit is based there, and from there have sprung up lots of independent companies. Silverback Films specialises in what we call blue chip filmmaking, which is pure natural history, but also has another department called Silverback Studios that makes more environmentally based films. So Silverback managed to get a commission with the BBC, to BBC One, to make some films called Wild Isles. Next slide, please. So Wild Isles consists of 5 programmes which were habitat based. It took over 10 years to get it commissioned. It's very difficult to get interest in British films. I think we felt there was a belief that people didn't think that the British wildlife could be as exotic, as exciting as worldwide wildlife. But we really didn't think that was the case. Next slide, please. Our ambition was to create Planet Earth for the wildlife of Britain and Ireland. We wanted to create a glossy programme to bring people's attention to the wildlife that we have. So we wanted to have the budget and the time to use all the kit and equipment that that we use when we're making the other global worldwide programmes. So I'm going to show you a little clip here of some of the footage that we managed to achieve, and I hope that you feel that it is as good as Planet Earth. Please play the video.
Welcome to a place that is astonishing. Nature in these islands, if you know where to look, can be extraordinary, dramatic, and beautiful. It rivals anything I've seen elsewhere. It's not far. It's home. Welcome to Wild Isles.
So it was quite an endeavour, and we spent 1,641 days in the field working with Simon King as one of our key cameramen, who you may have seen in his keynote speech. He was our consultant, but also one of our major cameramen. But to do this, we needed support. We needed co-producers. So we worked with RSPB and WWF and Open University with the funds that they could supply, and with their support in terms of their credibility and their environmental backing. We managed to raise the bar and create 5 very presentable shows. Next slide, please. The issue we had, though, was that we didn't want to present Britain through rose-tinted glasses. We all know that we have a climate crisis, and Britain sits very firmly in the middle of that. Britain is in itself one of the least biodiverse countries in the world. We're in the lower 10% in terms of biodiversity. So we wanted to create programmes that inspired people, that showed them fantastic wildlife, but we also wanted to contextualise it, to feed in information about the vulnerability of it. But we didn't want it to be all doom and gloom. Next slide, please. Although Britain is just a small set of islands, it has some incredible wildlife, and it has some very unique places, and just places that you can see nowhere else on the world. For example, we have 50% of the world's common bluebells. I think we in Britain probably Britain and Ireland take those for granted. We see them every spring, but we are very important custodians of this habitat. Next slide, please. We also have 85% of the world's chalk streams, which is hard to believe. There are just over 200, about 220 odd chalk streams in the whole of the world, and Britain has 85% of those in its southern quarters. And these chalk streams are unique habitats. The water bubbles up clearly through chalk, and we look after these habitats for the world. Next slide, please. We also have the most ancient oaks in Europe. Britain has more ancient oaks than the whole of the rest of Europe put together. And these old trees are important habitats. Within themselves, they can be habitats to over 2,000 different species. So we have, despite being very low in biodiversity, we still have important habitats that we need to protect. Next, please. So Britain is a set of islands. We can't consider ourselves in isolation. We're part of a bigger jigsaw of wildlife, and we are very important for migratory species such as seabirds. And we do have the largest gannet colony in the world. 75,000 pairs of gannets return to Bass Rock every year to breed. So although we are seemingly a small set of islands, we sit in that big global picture, and there is that connection. Without our habitats, this chain of wildlife is broken, so it's important for us to retain and protect them. Next slide, please. We were very lucky to get Sir David Attenborough on our team, and his voice and his involvement and thoughts helped us push the wonder of wildlife, but also those messages. Next screen, please. David was happy enough to personally reflect on his long years about the wildlife that he has seen. And in each programme, so for example in the woodland programme, we put him with his favourite ancient oak, which was in Richmond Park, and he was able to tell the message of we were trying to purvey of our forests. Britain sadly only has 13% of its forests left, which is not much coverage now, but within those forests there are still plenty of wildlife to be seen. Next slide. For our grassland programme, David did a piece, his opening piece, in a wild flower meadow. These two are in trouble. 95% of our flower meadows, our wildflower meadows, have been lost. And in the past 20 years, we've lost 60% of our insects. And I think many of us who have lived through 50 or so years have seen the change in insects. I know, just having looked at what's on my windscreen on my car, you don't see the same amount of insects. Next, please. For our river programme, David did a piece to camera on freshwater, and he was able to introduce the topic of river pollution. Despite the great number of wildlife we found within our rivers, this is one of our most threatened environments. So that was a thread that was followed and run through the whole of the programme. Next, please. And of course, there's passion for wildlife. David's connection and his sheer joy of being with the wildlife was able to give the viewers that magical feeling, which is what we wanted. We wanted people to care. It's about caring for wildlife so that you can do something about it and you can feel that connection. Next, please. We knew that we had a great number of species. We have species every bit as good as global programmes. Golden eagles with 2-metre wingspans. We've got over 400 nesting pairs of them. Next, please. We have intimate stories. This is a bee called Osmia, who is a mason bee that lays its eggs in shells of snails and covers them up with sticks. And we had a funny sequence with a bee looking a little bit like Harry Potter on a broomstick. Next, please. And we have major predators. Our Shetland Islands are visited by orca, killer whales, hunting seals, every bit as good as the rest of the global wildlife. Next, please. So we didn't want to leave people in the lurch. Another programme was made called Saving Our Wild Isles. This was made by the Silverback team for WWF and RSPB. And this gave people a chance to engage with more deeply with the things that were happening, the environmental messaging, and it showed passionate people that were engaged with projects, making things happen and making a difference. So it was a positive programme with strong messaging. Next slide, please. And this programme, you can still get it on iPlayer if you wish to see it. And we felt that the messaging really got through. I've got a Gogglebox clip, which we play now, which gives you an indication of how it went down.
It's weird, isn't it, that they've done all the other ones on actual TV and they've just put this one on iPlayer?
I think it should have been part of the main series.
Today, 1/4 of all our species of mammals are at risk of extinction,
What? I didn't realise that, did you?
as are 1/3 of our birds.
So 1/4 of mammals and 1/3 of birds are at risk of extinction. That's shocking, isn't it?
In just 20 years, our flying insects have declined by 60%.
60% in 20 years, there won't be now left soon.
Wow, I mean, David, when you put it like that, this guy don't hold back with his facts.
We are now one of the most nature-depleted countries on the planet.
Fucking hell, Dave, give us a lighter note, mate. Jesus.
No, that is bad, that.
I know.
We need to know about these things, because unless we know, we can't help put them right.
So strong opinions. Once people actually know what's going on, I think there's a lot of caring out there and a lot can be done. So from this programme, various activities inspired by Wild Hours have taken place, and you can go onto the RSPB website and WWF to find out more. Next slide, please. But there's more. Saving our Wild Hours. Extra programmes were made, 4 programmes were made called the business films, and National Trust joined this group of co-producers to make them, and these films were made for WWF and RSPB and National Trust. Next slide, please. So these 4 films are The Business of Nature, which you will be seeing, Hungry for Change, which is about farming, Catch-22, that delves more into coasts and fishing, and Banking for a Wild World, which is about finance. So I'm going to hand you over to Rhiannon, who is queen of these films, and she will tell you more.
Thank you, Hilary. And I just wanted to say what a pleasure it was to work with Silverback. They're so extremely talented. And as you probably all know, charities are very, very long-winded. So working with us to try and get all the different revisions to get it absolutely accurate was a real mission of love and dedication. So just wanted to say publicly thank you to your team for helping us tell these stories in a very probably more engaging way than we would have on our own. So thank you. And yet, just following on from what Hilary said, so you've got the BBC series, the 5 episodes on the BBC that you can still see on iPlayer. The 6th episode, which is the Saving Our Wild Isles, which you just saw a clip of there. And then we've got the 4 business films, one of which we'll see today. And I just wanted to give you a very brief intro of why we did these. We learned from the Our Planet project, where we had created, again with Silverback, 8 episodes that are on Netflix about the major ecosystems we have in the world. And lots of businesses came to us and said, we love the fact that you're talking about nature. We want to show this to our employees, but we can't show 8 hours of footage in our workplace. So have you got anything for business? And at the time, we hadn't actually got anything that was specific just for business. So we decided, because there was a demand for it, to create 2 business films. Well, one, first of all, to help package up the reports that we do, but in a more entertaining more kind of visually appealing way. So we used the images that were on the cutting room floor that didn't make it into the series, and then coupled that with interviews with key industry leaders and scientists to bring the latest science to a business audience in a very short program of, say, 45 minutes. Those films were extremely successful. So we've now done the 4 business films for this campaign for Wild Isles. And we know so far we've had 275 different requests from companies and organizations to screen the films. We've completed 70 of those screenings, and we know that we've had 20,000 employees watching the film so far. And that's from very, very different businesses. So we know we did a screening with Nestle, PepsiCo, Marks and Spencer's, John Lewis, Tesco. So you've got the breadth of the retailers. We've also done screenings with a lot of financial institutions like Aviva, NatWest. We're doing one coming up with HSBC. We've done ones with smaller banks as well, and international banks. And then we're moving on also to law firms. We've done a few screenings with law firms, the ICAW group of accountants, and it's lots of these companies, just like your the PMI, really understand that nature is important, but they don't really know how to talk about it in their workplace. So what we've done is created these videos so that you can do that. You can open the conversation like Stuart is doing with you guys. So it's basically a tool for you to use and screen within your own organizations and the projects that you work on. And we'll speak a bit more about that at the end. But I hope you enjoy the film that you're about to see. Again, it's the cutting room floor stuff that we recycled and put into a new film, and then got experts from the world of business to talk directly to businesses in the language that you guys are used to using. And also trying to give you the most relevant facts and also some of the solutions, because we know it's a very daunting mission to restore nature. So we're trying to showcase also examples of companies that are doing it already, how you can get started. And the main point is it is a journey. It's something that we all need to go down, and not every company has the answers. So I won't give away much more of the plot, but I hope you enjoy the film, and we'll be around afterwards to answer questions. So start thinking of your questions and popping them in the chat. And I guess if Jose, if you could cue the film, that would be great.
If we woke up tomorrow morning and there was no nature, what would that actually mean? There'd be no water. There would be disasters everywhere. There'd be disruption. Well, there would be no supply chain. And actually, if you take it to the nth degree, there would be no customers.
We are in a time of great instability. Climate change and ecological breakdown are already upon us.
This is like a disaster movie.
Fire, flooding.
At a certain point, there'll be too much risk in the system.
But while we are starting to address the climate emergency, a twin crisis, just as urgent, has unfolded alongside it.
The loss of biodiversity has reached an unprecedented rate in the history of humankind.
We're seeing crop failures because of biodiversity loss.
In the UK, we have lost nearly half our wildlife and destroyed large areas of our most valuable habitats. Losing nature's richness and variety takes us into dangerous and unpredictable territory.
In a nature-depleted country, simply put, we wouldn't be able to operate as a business.
This film will show why our future survival and prosperity is totally dependent on a healthy, natural world, and how a new way of doing business is needed now. Those that recognise the challenge for what it is and rise to it will thrive.
This is one of the biggest opportunities that we're sitting on this century.
Those that ignore it will not survive.
What is needed is you to take action now.
In the UK, we have some of the most varied landscapes in the world. From mountain ranges to ancient woodland, grasslands to dramatic coastlines. Our land and our seas are home to treasured native plants and animals, and globally critical for many species that visit to feed and breed. There is wonder to be found here, and we're a nation that loves the great outdoors.
He's a kingfisher. Yes.
Just hang on, let's see if we can see it.
But while the headlines focus on the destruction of faraway tropical rainforests, nature in our own backyard is just as threatened.
We often think we're looking out on a green and pleasant land, but actually it's completely the opposite. Our soil is depleted, our rivers are dirty, and I think we've taken for granted what we see is good.
Centuries of farming, urbanization and industry brought us great progress and prosperity, but came at the expense of nature. Over the past 75 years, an intensification of all of these caused the UK's biodiversity to plummet. And since the 1990s, the decline has continued at pace.
I don't think we've understood how much we have been destroying nature in the way that we live, in the way that we run our businesses, in the way that we invest. I think where we are right now is at a perilous place.
The statistics are stark. Over the last century, we've destroyed vast swathes of our most valuable habitats. Wetlands, 90% gone. Seagrass, 92% gone. Ancient woodland, 70% gone. Wildflower meadows, 97% gone. In fact, the UK has one of the lowest remaining levels of biodiversity on Earth, lower than any other G7 or G20 nation.
As a leader of a British business, knowing that the UK is in the bottom 10% of the most nature-depleted countries in the world makes me feel quite sick.
This crisis point for nature comes as the UK government and business community claim to be leading the way as the world tackles climate change. The UK was the first major economy to pass legislation committing to reach net zero emissions by 2050 at the latest. And there is no question of the vital role of business.
We are going to move towards making it mandatory for firms to publish a clear, deliverable plan setting out how they will decarbonise and transition to net zero.
But by only focusing on reducing emissions, we make the task impossible. Without nature firmly integrated in our transition plans, we cannot even get close to reaching net zero.
I think business has got their minds wrapped round net zero. And there's this massive drive and focus on reaching those targets. But actually, it's created quite a dangerous moment for nature because it's at the exclusion of everything else. And they're not separate issues. Nature helps us achieve net zero.
Understanding the true value of nature is not only critical to securing our net zero future, it's also vital to help businesses adapt to an already changing climate.
Nature is natural capital. It's an asset that provides benefits. It's an asset just like produced capital, like roads and buildings, and human capital. We are embedded in nature. Our economy is embedded in nature. So ultimately, all business, all economic activity relies on nature.
Nature pollinates our crops, provides us with raw materials and gives us clean air and water. But our reliance on healthy biodiversity goes even deeper than that. The intricate balance of the natural world regulates the Earth's temperature and weather patterns. And that makes it our greatest ally in our fight against climate change.
The trees and the landscape and the soils and the peatlands, they all soak up carbon and hold on to it and stop it from being in the atmosphere. So if we can harness that, that will make the job that we face that much easier. And obviously the opposite, if we lose those habitats, it makes the problem a heck of a lot worse.
In the UK, our net zero future could be secured by ecosystems we have totally undervalued.
Peatlands are one of the best examples we have of the multiple benefits that healthy ecosystems bring to society. The high quality water that they filter into British rivers is estimated at a value of about £888 million per year. On top of that, they are incredible ecosystems that accumulate over very long periods of time, layer upon layer of unrotted plant remains. And as those plants grew, they were sucking enormous quantities of carbon from the atmosphere.
In a healthy condition, the UK's peatlands could sequester more than 3 million tonnes of carbon dioxide every year. But we have drained, burned and grazed them. And now this precious asset emits more carbon than it absorbs.
It's been estimated that the cost of restoring all of Britain's peatlands would be about £20 billion. And yet the carbon benefits alone from doing that would be about £100 billion.
This is just one example of how nature will be crucial as we race to reduce the amount of carbon in the atmosphere. Resilient, healthy natural systems will also protect us and our livelihoods from the early effects of climate change. On land, trees and plants retain water during a drought and help regulate temperature. Wetlands slow down the flow of floodwater. Marine ecosystems like kelp and seagrass protect coastlines from wave energy and erosion. But we have depleted our landscapes and our seas to such an extent that they are buckling under the pressure, increasing the costly impacts of extreme weather.
I always say that if insurance companies are worried, then we really do need to pay attention. And insurance companies are worried. They recognise the part that nature can play in avoiding a disastrous future where we're looking at floods, we're looking at droughts. That's going to make it increasingly difficult for many people to live in their environment.
We've seen as a business the devastating consequences of climate change and weather-related loss on our customers. At a certain point, there'll be too much risk in the system.
We don't have enough nature left to purify our rivers. We don't have enough nature to ensure long-term food security. We don't have enough nature to buffer against the effects of climate change or to catch enough carbon from the atmosphere. And we don't have enough high-quality nature for everybody to have access for their health and well-being.
Over 1 million species will go into extinction within this century. 50% of the global GDP is dependent on natural resources. It's not just an environmental issue. It is an economic issue, it is a financial issue, it's a developmental issue. Biodiversity is the foundation of life.
A totally new business strategy is needed. And its rollout is urgent. With nature in free fall, humanity faces an unstable future. And that's a very risky place to do business.
There is no question that instability is bad for business. This instability that we're talking about is not just limited to the emerging markets, but it's also here at home in the UK.
If we collectively extract resources at too great a rate, then that will in turn come back to harm the businesses that we own, and pretty much all of them. Understood properly, when you really read the science, where we're heading to by the end of the century is potentially as extreme as civilizational collapse.
That future is still avoidable. Global leaders have now agreed to the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework to halt the loss of nature and put it on a path to recovery by 2030. How we translate that into action is down to our government and our businesses. We must create a nature-positive net zero economy, which means nature is regenerated as we cut our greenhouse gas emissions. And with so much biodiversity lost already, we cannot delay. We need to start now to build back the natural systems that keep our planet habitable.
The business community is in a unique position, actually the best position to help us turn all of this around.
They have the funds, they have the technology, they have the people, and actually the know-how to do something about it.
So you've got a consumer over here who is ready for the change. You know, they understand more, they know more, they want to see action. You've got governments over here who are still trying to formulate some kind of plan, but we can't wait for that. Business is in that middle position that can satisfy their consumer because they understand that's what their consumer wants, but they can move much, much faster than a government.
If businesses bring nature into the heart of their operations, it will change the future for the whole of society and protect the resources and services on which they rely. We're now in the situation where the cost of doing nothing is much higher than the cost of doing the right thing.
Many people think that profit and purpose are in conflict. I would argue the contrary. Only by having a strong purpose will you actually guarantee a strong long-term profit. A strong purpose motivates us. We all want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. It makes you a preferred employer. It drives up the engagement. And all of this ultimately gets translated into better results.
The only sustainable way forward for us as a business, indeed I would argue for any business, is to be nature positive, because without being nature positive, ultimately you can't be profit positive.
Our future prosperity depends on a change of course. And brave businesses are already on the case. But the scale of this challenge needs every business of every size to rise to it.
This transformation that we're talking about is not easy. We need the scale well beyond the Industrial Revolution and the speed well beyond the technological revolution. Most businesses are convinced of why we need to change, but they struggle with the how. And for businesses to get started, it's a very simple process. It takes courage.
There are already many tools and frameworks available for business to get started in managing their impacts and dependencies on nature and the risks and opportunities that result from that.
The first step for any business is to work out where and how you rely on nature, and where and how you impact it.
The first phase is to locate your interface with nature. So where are your business assets? Where along your supply chain are things located? You move to evaluating your impacts and dependencies on nature. How are you affecting it in both positive and negative ways? And how are you depending on it? Moving on to assessing the risks and opportunities that emerge from that, and then preparing to respond.
And your biggest risk could be your relationship with your customers.
If you are not planning to reduce your impact on this planet, then you don't know it yet, but you're already in trouble, because the consumer is there and they're not going to accept being fobbed off. They're going to want to really clearly understand when they buy from you, whether it's goods or whether it's your services, what lies behind that.
From supply chain to customer expectation, every business already depends on a connection to nature and relies on the stability it brings to our planet. And every business is at risk if we don't bring nature into our transition plans now.
I think the biggest challenge is just getting started. If you just get started, you'll start to find ways to make it work, new opportunities, new alliances. It's a journey. Before you know it, you're in a better place.
Once you've started this journey, the next step is to give your team something big to aim for.
To drive action, you need to set yourself some big, hairy, audacious goals that make you a little bit nervous.
If these targets don't make you feel uncomfortable, or if you already have all the answers on how to achieve them, then they're not big enough.
Science-based targets for nature matter because unless we set credible, ambitious targets that we can be judged against, that our customers can judge us against, that our suppliers can judge us against, we think that we won't make fast enough progress. We want to be one of the leading businesses in really getting the importance of nature and its link with climate change absolutely at the forefront.
A business that knows its target can swiftly move to taking action. We cannot afford to lose any more nature, so first we must stop destroying it by taking action to reduce the impact of our production and consumption.
There has been, for a long period, an assumption that the destruction of nature is a regrettable but inevitable prerequisite for economic growth and development.
We need to change that way of thinking and, just as critically, take action to restore what we have lost.
Restoration of nature is so important because I don't think we've recognised how much damage we have already done and how close to the edge we really are.
Less bad is simply not good enough anymore. I used to murder 10 people, now I only murder 5 people. I'm not a better murderer. Less bad is still bad. So we have to change our mindset.
From supporting regenerative farming to investing in our precious landscapes, businesses can secure their future by helping to bring nature back.
There are many different ways a business can invest in restoring nature, whether it is peatlands, wetlands, or seagrasses where you are storing carbon but protecting coastal communities. All of these things have a positive benefit for the businesses, but also for the communities that they are serving.
Businesses can't exist without nature, so finding ways to avoid destroying it, while also investing in projects that restore biodiversity, simply makes good business sense.
Nature is so key for all of our futures that putting nature in a separate box is no longer fit for business purpose. You need to bring it into the centre of your organisations, the centre of your strategy, and understand that by investing in nature, you're investing in the long-term future of your business.
Once a business is acting for nature, it's important to make sure everyone knows about it.
The most important thing is that businesses speak up. Too often businesses say, I don't want to speak up because undoubtedly it's going to be controversial and some people will attack me. But anytime you're in a position to do something about it, to speak up about things that you know are right, make you actually part of the solution.
Advocating within a business is also important, so that everyone is focused on the same mission.
We very consciously wove our environmental and sustainability strategy into the core business strategy. We embedded it in the core purpose of the business. And when we think about business problems, we do so starting from the point of view of how do we make this more environmentally sustainable? How do we make it more planet friendly?
I understand that it's not easy. There are areas that are hugely complex, but what you have to do is just start moving forward and ensure that all of your team understand why you're now on that journey.
But alone, we can only go so far. Just as nature is interconnected, so is business. The issues we face are of such magnitude that no single organisation or sector can solve them alone.
We need hands on deck. Whole of government, whole of society, whole of sectors together. And this is the world where we are. Cooperation among businesses, cooperation among governments, cooperation between governments and businesses. All of us hands on together.
In any sector, some businesses will always lead the way, but there isn't time to wait. So regulation is the only way to ensure those lagging behind are compelled to catch up.
If we're going to avoid every business creating its own disparate ecosystem that isn't joined up in any way whatsoever, government has to provide a framework. It has to say, this is the vision, this is the part that you can play as a business. It just ensures that there is a level playing field, but it also means that everybody understands where they're going and the impact that that's going to have. Because without it, businesses are left considering their own impact, but very often the whole impact is far greater than the individual impacts of each business.
Collaboration is essential, not only with government, but also with suppliers, customers, investors, and even competitors.
This is not like normal business. Normal business, people can be a bit secretive and they want to ensure that they've got a competitive advantage. This is not what this is about. This is about everyone helping to move forward.
This collaboration even means sharing innovation.
We see it as being one of our responsibilities that we share ideas and we share information. We launched the Z House with Salford University, an exemplar house showcasing innovation from our supply chain to improve the thermal efficiency of homes, to reduce the water consumption of homes, and a great biodiversity environment. We don't see that as being a secret. We recognise that this is something that we have to share.
Sharing ideas and innovation is one way of working together. Another is to collaborate on shared targets to drive industry change. For example, several of the UK's biggest supermarkets have jointly committed to halve the environmental impact of shopping baskets by the end of the decade.
The environment is an area where we don't see it as a competitive playground. We see it as an opportunity for the industry to come together, make sure the whole industry moves forward from an environmental point of view.
The retailers have committed to take action across key areas where food has the biggest impact on the planet, from how we farm to what we choose to eat. In the highly competitive world of supermarkets, this is a remarkable example of the teamwork that is needed from all sectors.
Every business to have impact, however large you are, you need to collaborate with other businesses in your sector to have the biggest impact for customers, the biggest impact on nature, the biggest impact on the world. And I hope the collaboration we've shown gives confidence to other businesses.
Working together, alongside government and with the communities they serve, businesses in the UK can unlock a whole new future.
Increasingly, we're starting to understand that this is probably one of the biggest opportunities that we're sitting on this century. The cost that we are incurring as a result of destruction of biodiversity is significantly higher than what it would cost us to prevent the issues in the first place. And that makes it such an attractive business opportunity for all of us.
A nature-positive, net-zero transition plan will create opportunities through innovation. It will generate jobs and attract new customers.
This is incredibly exciting, but it demands action and it demands urgency. Customers are agitating for us not just to be thoughtful about the environment, they want us to go further. They're demanding, and we've got to meet those demands. And I see a really strong, beautiful commercial case for us.
And it's not just down to financial checks and balances. The future of our families, of society, and of generations to come depend on us getting this moment right.
Nature and business can coexist, and nature and business must coexist. Business has got to be about a sense of balance. It's not just about the out-and-out pursuit of profit.
As the UK emerges from the shocks of Brexit and the COVID pandemic, by delivering a nature-positive future here at home, we have the potential to lead the way to a brave, new way of doing business that benefits our natural world and secures our place in it.
The UK has to be, and I believe can be, a leader on nature. We can do this, but we've got to act.
I'm sold, I'm convinced that the time for action is now. I'm a believer in humanity and mankind's ability to innovate and find solutions, usually very late in the day, unfortunately, but I do believe that we have that capacity, and it's important. The sooner we act, the better.
Human beings are amazing. We can do this. The issue is, are we going to use our amazingness for the bad, or are we going to apply it for the good?
We've had 30 years of warnings about the impacts of climate change, the impacts we're causing to the natural world. It's now time for a crash program to reduce our pressures on nature, to restore climatic balance, and to put the natural world at the centre of our economy. We've left it till the last possible moment. Now is the moment when we have to act with vigour and act at scale.
Wow, what a film. I'm sure many of you, like I am, are probably feeling quite emotional having seen that film. I've already seen it a couple of times before as well. First of all, congratulations to the team at Save Our Wild Isles, and obviously influenced by Wild Isles, for the wonderful work in producing that. And for me, it's no surprise that Save Our Wild Isles have also just received the Global Sustainability Film Award for the film Hungry for Change, which of course is a sister film to this particular one in the same group. I'll just make a couple of observations before bringing back Hilary and and Rhiannon into a discussion session. For me, seeing a film where there's in the same film quite a nature positive view of the world, optimistic view of the world, where the phrase civilizational collapse is used. It's extreme contrasts in the ideas and messages coming across. Business clearly has a key role to make a difference. I was fascinated to see that by spending 20 billion pounds on peatlands, there is 100 billion in benefits from carbon alone. So I think that's a very clear message from a purely financial view of the world, let alone the nature view of the world. And I think a lot of the points made in the film relate clearly to us as the project management community, the need for scale and speed and courage to deliver that, the need for big, hairy, audacious goals that should be uncomfortable to deliver. I think these are important challenges that we as project professionals have the skills to deal with. Nature being at the heart of business strategy, bringing the whole team to make that happen, leveraging the whole of government, all sectors, all businesses, regulation to join it up. And then the collaboration piece, shared innovation, shared targets, working together, not against each other. I must say there's a lot of thoughts there that I personally found very inspiring and challenging to us all. So the way we're planning to do the rest of this session, we got quite a nice amount of time available to first of all have some like a panel style discussion with Hilary and Rhiannon. So there's a few points I'd like to go through with them, but then following on from that, we'd like to just open up to questions. So please be putting questions into the comment stream and we'll pick up some of those. And then we'll kind of alternate between that. So have a bit of panel conversation and then also take some Q&A from the audience. So please be thinking those through. So yes, so Jose, could we bring Hilary and Rhiannon back into the session? Great. Well, I suppose that the first question in our discussion, perhaps open it up to Rhiannon. You've screened this film to many business audiences now. I think it'd be very interesting to know what kind of you've had from those businesses, what kind of feedback you've been getting to the messages contained within the film.
It's been amazing, actually. We've been really pleasantly surprised because we know that a lot of companies do understand emissions and are starting to get to grips with net zero and the challenges that that's going to have. But it's been really positive to see the positive reaction towards the nature challenge, because it's actually a very positive discussion about replenishing rather than kind of going on a diet and like sacrificing all the things that we know and love. It's about giving back. It's about bringing communities together. It's about restoring what we've lost. There's a lot of national pride that's kind of been coming up, which we've been really heartened by. I think the British Isles are so passionate about the nature that is here. I mean, I grew up in Canada. We obviously have great nature there as well, but the British Isles have such a deep psychological connection to nature that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. I think the biggest sentiment we've been seeing is shock. Like you saw in the clip that Hilary showed, people just can't believe that we are in the bottom 10% for biodiversity globally. And I guess we all know the reasons why. You know, we went through the Industrial Revolution, moved people into towns, but also the amount of land for agriculture is just enormous. And I think that just bringing those facts to people makes them understand why the environmental groups are very stressed. And why the scientists are kind of running around going, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? So it's been really heartwarming actually to bring the discussions and to hear how important it is for professionals to actually integrate this into their day jobs. I think that before we haven't really had the right tools for people to do so. And we've also got things like the TNFD framework and the science-based targets for nature, which have come on in the past year, which really give companies a way to concretely engage with these issues, which perhaps they haven't been able to do before. So we've been really heartened by the response so far.
Yeah. At the end of the day, all those business people are also people.
Exactly.
Who inherently have a contact with nature as well.
And just one example, like one of the big food manufacturers didn't realize that nature was in such a state in the UK, so they've actually put nature restoration projects now in the center of their goals, whereas they had been planning to plant trees in other countries. They're actually realizing, oh, actually we can do a lot here in the UK, which they hadn't realized before. So we are actually starting to see concrete restoration projects come out of this as well.
Very good, excellent. Maybe a question for Hilary. The film starts with quite a gloomy picture of biodiversity decline in the UK, bottom 10% of in worldwide in terms of nature depletion. What are your thoughts on that as a from a biological nature perspective? And was it a surprise to you and the team involved when you started out on this adventure, this exercise?
No, not a total surprise. I've been filming for 40 years, so it's almost been like a time lapse for me. I've got favourite places that I visit, and you do refilm certain animals and return to habitats. And I've seen change over time, and I've seen change since my childhood. I remember there being stag beetles and lots of sparrows and much more wildlife, and I've seen that disappear over the years. I think for my team and for younger people, it's not such a shock. They haven't seen it going, and the sort of baseline of what they think is acceptable is low, and it's too low. And I'm quite often saying, look, this is not good enough. This what is exciting you is diminished. So and I think a lot of people at home who don't get out, from what we saw in the Gogglebox clip, you can be a bit disconnected from it, so you don't actually realise that it is disappearing. So it wasn't entirely shocking, but it's not all doom and gloom. There are still big pockets of wildlife, and there is hope.
Yeah, great. Rhiannon, one of the points that came across was the role of regulation in driving positive action and joining things up. However, I think we're all aware that in the UK, we've seen recent examples where government policy seems to be focusing more on, what do I need to do to get the next set of votes, and perhaps stepping back from the leadership that the UK once seemed to be demonstrating back at COP26. We're first to sign up for net zero, etc. It seems that there's a movement to step back away from this, and which I think is concerning, just at the time when we need to move forward. I don't know if you have any thoughts you'd like to share around that.
Yes, we're also really massively concerned about this as well. Obviously, leaving the EU, we've had the opportunity, potentially, people can argue that we will be able to take charge of our environmental laws and make them stronger. That was the rhetoric that was given at the time. We're now seeing, unfortunately, an awful lot of watering down of these commitments, even things that Rishi announced in at COP26 2 years ago. He's now, well, I guess it's not representative of his entire party, of course, but he is also kind of moving back on quite a lot of those promises. So it does concern us a lot, because we can't afford to be taking our foot off the gas now. I mean, the amount of changes we need to see by 2030, that's kind of the point where our scientists believe that we need to have restored more nature and have more nature than we do today. That is the kind of key date for us to aim for, and that is quickly slipping away. It's going to be difficult to halt deforestation in the Amazon and all these places that we know and love. And at the moment, we're treacherously close to these tipping points, which will actually turn these areas of, not just for the wildlife, but the planet needs the lungs of we need the lungs in the Amazon. That's basically the lungs of the planet. If that becomes a carbon emitter rather than a carbon sink, we're in serious trouble. So we have a very small window of opportunity to replenish the world as we know it, and hopefully bring back more nature than we have now. If we miss that window, we are really, really walking into no man's land, and it is quite frankly terrifying. It is as stark as civilization collapse, because we won't be able to stop the changes that will happen. And just if you look at any kind of news broadcast in the past year, I mean, I'm from Canada, we had wildfires on both sides of the country for the first time ever. And this is the new normal. It's not that this is kind of something that's regular people can't see now. Just the level of flooding we've had in the UK. Again, if we had more nature left to soak up these areas like the traditional wetlands and salt marsh and the floodplains that are there for a reason, like if we had those systems still intact, we wouldn't be seeing as much damage as we see today. So it does worry us very much that that at the moment a lot of these regulations are seeming to be rolled back. Just in terms of water quality, I mean, it's a crazy thing. My daughter was going to a school camp, and they were going to go in one of the rivers, and I was thinking, do I actually need to Google and see whether there's going to be sewage discharge in that river at the time when she's there? I mean, this is unthinkable that we potentially have to do this, and going water bathing, like bathing on the coastlines. Like, it is absolutely crazy that in this day and age that we actually have to do that in a country like the UK. It just blows my mind, to be honest.
Yeah, shocking.
I think as well, changing the deadlines does not help. It focuses your mind. It's like doing your homework. If you know it's got to be in tomorrow, you do it. But if you change those deadlines, it takes away that urgency, and we don't have the time now. So we've got to focus in. It's very short term.
And everybody looks to the UK, and if we take our foot off the gas, unfortunately, a lot of other countries are going to use that as an excuse to do the same. And we're actually not on the front lines of climate change. That also, we have a moral responsibility to help the people in the rest of the world who don't have access to the kind of infrastructure that we do have access to, and the level of investment that we can potentially raise. So it's a huge deal that we're really very concerned about.
Yeah. I think we'd all like to see supportive regulation getting in place quickly. I suppose we're looking forward to COP28 at the end of the month. We'd like to see a positive outcome from that, but I think the reality is it's unlikely to go as far as we would like it to go. Are there things we could just, as responsible professionals, the people on this call, just agree to get on and do just because it's the right thing to do? Are there any examples you might be able to think of just stuff that it's just the right thing to get on with, regardless of that regulation getting into place?
I think yes. I think as the message of the film said, that if you bring nature into your everyday discussions in the workplace, like whether you're ordering the biscuits for the next team meeting, making sure they're responsibly sourced palm oil based, not kind of just regular palm oil, like all these little tiny things. Plus also when you're doing a new, say, infrastructure project, look at the nature that you have currently. It's not a question of kind of planting a few trees in exchange somewhere else. Those are potentially valuable ecosystems that have taken hundreds and thousands of years to evolve. We need those carbon sinks and carbon storage possibilities. So it's basically trying to really understand the value of what we have around us. Like I was just remembering my younger daughter. She used to look at our garden and say, "My goodness, it's so busy out there, Mummy, because the earthworms are doing this and the trees are making oxygen." And she could actually see the value that nature was giving us, whereas I was just looking out thinking, "Oh my goodness, it needs weeding." It's that kind of having a different outlook on the nature that you have around on the infrastructure sites that you're creating, and also just bringing it in to try and understand what you can conserve, what you can replenish, and also just reducing your impact. And I think a lot of companies are focusing a lot on their plastic and potentially their waste, which is great, but there's a whole host of other aspects that really need to be looked into as well. And I would encourage every company to look into science-based targets for nature. I know that a lot of companies probably, and professionals who are on this call, are involved in companies that have set science-based targets for nature, for climate. So in terms of like 1.5 degree targets of reducing your emissions by that point. Now you can do the same with fresh water and with land conversion to understand what your impact is, and also how you can reduce that over time in a really concrete way that aligns with the science. So we would definitely encourage people to look into that, those kind of frameworks and targets for sure.
Yeah. Okay. I've got one more point I'd like to raise for Hilary, but I see we've got some questions starting to come in. Maybe you'd like to be thinking more about some questions from the audience, which we'll switch over to in just a couple of minutes' time. But Hilary, before we do that, I'd just like to raise one point. Are there any examples you could share with us of the challenges that you faced or that the team faced during the filming of Wild Isles, and then of course the same material went on to support Save Our Wild Isles? Specific challenges in particular where you may have seen the challenges as a result of biodiversity decline?
Certainly, in terms of finding pristine habitats, finding an example of a really clean river was more difficult. Finding a wildflower meadow with lots of insects in wasn't as easy as it used to be. And I think too, one of our major challenges was the weather. It's not predictable. We had to cancel great many shoots because it was raining, or the time that we'd been recommended by the scientists to go and look at a behaviour, or the time that there was a breeding of birds or insects, it wasn't happening anymore due to weather change. I mean, we've got quite a diversity of climate across Britain. We've got a cold north and a warmer south, and our Arctic regions, our higher regions, there's less snow there now, so Arctic hares are changing their camouflage as are ptarmigans. They're becoming white to match the snow, but the snow isn't there anymore. Things like snow buntings, which is basically an Arctic bird which was at the extreme of its range. Britain is its most southernmost point. We will lose that species. It's not going to be cold enough for them. They won't become extinct, but they will probably, from England, they will move further north. So I think, those kind of climatic changes are impacting the sort of character of our wildlife. There will be winners and losers. The south will get hotter, so some of the insects that migrate, butterflies, etc., may stay in Britain, and we will get other insects that are coming across from Europe. So I think it's a changing picture, but I would say really the weather has had the greatest impact on us.
And that's above and beyond the normal British weather, I have to say, being Canadian.
It sure rains a lot, but it rains an awful lot.
I know. It's just absolutely sodden.
At the moment you say that, I'm hearing the rain beating heavily upon the roof of my studio here, my office space here in Belgium. So, but perhaps that's normal for this time.
I thought you were in the middle of a forest, Stuart. It looks lovely there where you are.
That's where I go walking. That's on the nice days. Okay, thank you, Hilary, for that. Let's go across to the questions. There's one in the chat from Hugo. Jose, I don't know if you could perhaps bring it up on the screen. Otherwise, I could read it out. Right, thank you. So, I think this in relations to the changing of the position in the UK in terms of timelines. Maybe it's one for Rhiannon to pick up on.
Yeah, I think, as you say, there's a lot of disinformation that's out there, and I think in a world where science and facts are, constantly challenged, we do have to stay on top and call out disinformation where we see it. I mean, I think 99% of scientists agree that this is a factual thing. We could have prevented it many, many years ago. I mean, we've been talking about, deforestation in the Amazon since I was a teenager. We've lost 30, 40 years of action. So yes, it is. Some businesses will always have laggards who are concerned about only profit. But I think that speaking to more and more businesses, we realize that actually, even since COVID, a lot of businesses are really realizing what is their place in society, what function do they serve. It's not just about making profit, it's also about serving humanity and building that kind of long-term future. We also see a lot of pension companies actually who are really changing the way that they invest, because they, as Richard Curtis always says, there's no point saving for a pension in a world on fire. So we'll always have the companies who kind of are only after one thing, but then there's a vast minority of other companies which at the moment are quite silent, what Deborah Meaden calls green hushing. Unless you're feeling that you're doing everything right, a lot of companies are kind of quiet about what they're actually doing. So, but when we go and speak to them all, they're all asking for the government to be more progressive on these issues, so they have certainty beyond the next election cycle, and to actually help us become more progressive, so we can restore and know that our kids and grandkids will have a safe habitat to live in. So I think that the companies like that hopefully are going to be more and more in the minority as more and more companies stand up and say, we need these things to happen. It's kind of like health and safety and seat belts. They weren't popular when they came out, but they've saved a heck of a lot of lives. So I do feel that the environment is one of those aspects where, it will be uncomfortable for some, but for the greater good, it just has to happen.
Maybe I could add to that also. I've also been quite involved in the automotive sector myself, and very interested in electric vehicles as a user of an electric vehicle. I think the reaction that we've seen has been partly driven by the state of readiness of the respective organisations, and those where they are able to quickly move towards full electrification and are already well down that journey with the plans in place have said, we're going to stick with the original targets. Those where they were finding that difficult were probably happy to have been given the opportunity to extend it out. I find it unfortunate that we're back to the film. I love that phrase, big, hairy, audacious goals. I think the companies, Toyota is clearly it's one of the biggest companies on the planet. It'd be nice to see them setting big, hairy, audacious goals and going for that from a position of leadership. Over the decades, they have had some great technology. The early hybrid cars, etc. The promotion of hydrogen or as an alternative fuel. Okay, there's a big debate around the role of hydrogen, but yeah, it'd be nice to see these big industrials setting them, being happy to set up some big, hairy, audacious goals and going for them rather than accepting getting off the hook. Any more questions? I'm not seeing any immediately in the chats. We can perhaps go back to a few other discussion points while people are thinking through some further points. It's probably another question for Rhiannon. In the film, Emma Howard Boyd referred to wetlands, peatlands, seagrass, examples where nature restoration can have a massive positive impact. I think we'd all like to hear some good news. So I don't know if there's any examples where we've already seen business working in a way with nature, where we've seen some beneficial outcomes in that area of wetland, peatland, seagrass restoration, where there's perhaps also been some kind of benefit for business as well as a benefit for nature and the environment.
Yeah, I think all of these ecosystems provide so many benefits in terms of like the wildlife, of course, but the wider ecosystem services like seagrass, for example, can protect coastlines from the massive waves. It can also provide, obviously, the nurseries, the kind of sheltered areas that the fish need to grow and to thrive. But it can also store 35 times more carbon, seagrass can, than a rainforest. Peatlands, same thing. Peatlands are great carbon storage, but they also filter and clean our water. So I know there's companies in Scotland, whiskey companies in Scotland looking into, they're using peat obviously to help with the water filtration and the taste of their whiskey. So that's kind of an easy one to go to. But we're seeing John Lewis and Aviva, for example, they're working with WWF to restore an area in Norfolk and in the center of England to really help. Like Aviva's doing this project to restore salt marshes, because that is an area, again, that's quite close to the coastline that is a great carbon sink. It provides a lot of habitat benefits, but also a lot of protection for the coastlines around those areas. So they're investing in those areas to try and with data monitoring tools. So it doesn't actually have to be like physical planting of plants, although they are doing that too. They're putting in plants in wetland areas to help the resilience of that natural landscape. And for Aviva, it's a huge business benefit because the more secure the UK is climatically, the less damage there is to their house insurance sector, because a lot of the insurance companies are worried that premiums are going to go up so high that people will no longer be able to afford insurance. So for them, the business benefit of restoring the natural landscape helps make the UK safer, and then hopefully will provide business benefits for them as well, because it'll help safeguard their business. Aviva's also investing in Canada as well, doing the same thing with areas in Canada to try and help with that kind of weather resistance. John Lewis is working on helping with the farmers and the restoration of the natural landscape to make like more natural landscapes for pollinators and for wildflowers. So let's see, Sky is working on seagrass restoration also to help with their ocean rescue program, and also again with building more climate heroes and ocean heroes to raise awareness. So there's lots of benefits that are happening. You just have to find something that's relevant to your business. So for example, we were, Carlsberg and companies like that are working with farmers to use less chemicals and less pesticides, which then has a positive impact on the water quality that they then use in their beer, for example. So if you pick something in nature, that a business benefit that is close to your business, it does make business sense to help invest and protect it, and then hopefully they're going to also be more active on speaking to government about more regulation, because obviously they're assuming that the water is going to be of a certain quality to then put into their products. And if it falls below a certain grade, they're going to have to pay money to invest in it to clean it. So for them, it is a business benefit to keep the water more clean and healthy and fresh. So it's those kind of things that we're seeing a lot of. Peatland restoration by co-op, for example, again, for water filtration and for carbon storage. And a lot of these projects can also then help with your net zero goals as well, because we won't get to net zero without nature. So we're encouraging lots of companies to, and I think there's guidance coming out with the Transition Plan Task Force, which I don't know, some of your members might be aware of. At COP26, Rishi Sunak announced that all companies of certain size would have to create transition plans basically on how they're going to get to net zero. And they set up a task force, the Transition Plan Task Force, TPT. And we've been working with them to make sure that nature is integrated in that. And they're coming out with guidance very imminently on how that will happen. So there is hopefully a lot of guidance that can help companies understand how to do this going forward. But then it's also just about, picking something that's relevant for your company and showing the business benefit of it to your company itself.
And I think there are some big, bold, hairy projects that NGOs are undertaking. Up in Scotland, Cairngorms Connect is a project that is working on for 200 years. Their project is to connect up bits of habitat and to restore bits of restore forests. So there's ambitious, hairy projects that NGOs are undertaking as well.
Yeah, and there's a couple of examples in the chat from Gordon McKellar. No-take zone in Lambash Bay in Arran, marine protected area in South Arran. Perhaps examples of that happening.
Yeah, and there's also investment in tech. For example, in our marine film, that Catch-22, there's a company called Fish Tech Marine who make this pinger, this acoustic pinger that reduces bycatch. So it sends out this signal so that other mammals don't get caught in the nets. And so John Lewis, for example, is doing a trial to integrate that into their supply chains to actually then protect nature. So it doesn't have to be a physical restoration project. It's just whatever you can do, whether that's investing in technology or pioneering a new solution or sharing the knowledge of something that you've done with other companies, whatever you can do, whatever company is in a place to share and to kind of invest in future looking technologies is also really, really, really helpful. There's one that we saw on the news the other day, actually, using seaweed tablets to help reduce methane in cows, for example, to help with the gases. So, I mean, there's lots of interesting, really cool, innovative projects that are out there to help support nature.
Yeah, and I think the Earthwatch project that is investing in projects, there's some astounding technology that is coming through, plastics being made from seaweed. So, there's a lot of brains working on this.
Yeah. I suppose many businesses are naturally cautious, but if they see a case study, a track record of another business succeeding in their sector, it will be a stimulant that they'll want to follow that. They won't want to be left out. So hopefully that will also be a way of pulling perhaps the less innovative companies along into the mainstream.
Yes, definitely. And talking about the issues as well, like joining us with advocacy and talking to the government to say, this is important to you and your business, because, if you're relying on certain things like fresh water, for example, in your business, it's really important that the government understands that it's, not just the utility companies that have a vested interest in this, it's also the other companies as well. So joining us or other companies on our advocacy with the government is also super important. I see someone in there is talking about the no-take zone in Arran. In the marine film, they do, I think the stat, which was absolutely shocking, is only 0.02% of UK waters are actually protected, fully protected. There's so many loopholes. And in fact, different NGOs, some NGOs think we should have more regulation. Some just want us to actually enact the regulation that we actually already have. So there's so many issues that people can get involved in, and it's really about picking something really personally passionate to you and your organization that can help you then get that momentum internally to help transform the way that we do things.
And I think consumers are becoming more canny. They're interrogating businesses, and they're looking at what they're buying and looking at the green credentials. So it's in the interest of the world to do this, but it's sensible business as well, because it's a new world and people are looking for things that ease their conscience, but also are green. So it's a no-brainer really in terms of making those changes.
Now the films in the Save Our Wild Isles series they're focused on the UK. It's films made in the UK. A lot of our audience today in this event will be from throughout Europe and even beyond. It's a very international audience. I know you don't have a particular detailed view of what's happening in other countries, but do you think that what you've learned from the decline in the UK, would there be a similar story? Would that apply in other countries in general?
I think in Europe there is similar decline. Britain is in particular trouble because we're such a small country. We're so highly populated. We have so little space. It's a slightly better story for places like Italy that have a much more sort of diverse geography. They have alpine areas, marine areas, much more coastline. So they have the space and they have more pockets of wildlife. So there is more hope. And with our research looking for behaviours, we could have filmed them much more easily if we'd gone to Croatia or Romania or some of these European countries that had more space. So I don't think we can ignore the fact that there is an impact on biodiversity across Europe, but it's in a slightly better state than Britain.
Now, I mean, thinking back about this event, this conference, it's focusing on the project management profession. So I'm sure many people on the call will be project professionals. I'd be interested, maybe this is a question for Rhiannon, but Hilary, also please chip in. What advice you would give to professionals seeking to develop their project's professional career in a worthwhile direction? How could they do that in a way that might maximize the beneficial impact on nature?
I think it's good to get involved with projects. We all hear about tree planting, but I think business have to carefully interrogate the projects that they do get involved with to make sure that, for example, if trees are planted, they're not just left. They need care. There is that element of greenwashing, and I think to get their staff involved and engaged with nature, so that they want to push these projects.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think there's so many examples of, tree planting schemes. They're planting the wrong trees in the wrong place, not giving them enough water. And so they just, it's not a question of replacing one with something else. It has to be a really well thought through process. And actually, if someone wants to read more about other countries and their ecosystems, Swiss Re is a reinsurance company. They've come out with quite a few reports that say that 1/5 of countries are at risk from ecosystem collapse. So it is something that's we're not just suffering from here in the UK. 1/5 of countries in the world. It's a staggering amount. And in the film you saw, I think it's 55% of GDP actually now, because when we did the filming, there's been a new report since we filmed, which now says 55% of global GDP is dependent on nature. So it is something absolutely crucial. So I would agree with Hilary, getting out and involved. There's a really cool system, citizen science projects where you can go out and, use a team day out to test the water quality of your local river or your local lake. Or there's lots of really interesting kind of team building exercises you can do. You can go visit wetlands, you can go visit salt marshes, just to kind of upskill, which can be part of your own personal development as well in terms of your career. And as Hilary says, saying no is also really powerful. We've seen, I actually come from an advertising background, and it's been really interesting to see a lot of the, some old colleagues of mine they're now, voting with their feet. They're not accepting fossil fuel projects. So they're not going to be greenwashing for other companies. And it's a really difficult stance to have when everybody needs to make money still at the end of the day. But having this kind of constant pressure of making it unacceptable to not consider nature and to, call people out where they really are, spreading misinformation. All of these things are super, super helpful. And in terms of your industry, you guys span such a wide range of projects. It will be really interesting to see how you take this journey forward as well with all of your professionals. As you say, the UK is really a model of for many other countries to follow. So it'd be really exciting to see what you guys do with this information. And as you guys go on your own journey as well, it'd be really fantastic to see the developments that come along.
Yeah, one of the messages I'm trying. Oh, sorry, Hilary, Carol.
I think too the concept of offsetting is something we should question quite carefully, because you're much better off putting something back in and giving more rather than taking something out and then just replacing it. Offsetting is a difficult concept.
Yeah, we would consider it a last resort. It's not a get out of jail card free. We see also companies just offsetting everything and carrying on as normal, and that's really not the way we see the future.
Certainly, one of the things we're trying to encourage within the team involved in the sustainability activity within the PMI is to be encouraging our colleagues to be thinking about what are the most sustainable areas they should be working in as project professionals, choosing projects that have sustainability benefits, executing their projects in a way that are being executed in a sustainable way, regardless of whether the actual outcome is actually directly sustainable related. Which perhaps brings on to, rather than just thinking about ourselves as individuals, we're part of a big organization. So the PMI, it has over 700,000 members worldwide. So it's a big organization. And we support through our standards, actually, many more than that. Around 5 million project professionals are supported by the service of the PMI. So I see it as a tremendous channel for driving change. So given that we've got that scale, I know that the films are about the UK, but given that we potentially have that scale, any thoughts about how we might, as a global organization, try to leverage that to maximum effect?
Hilary, do you want to go first on this one, or do you want me to go?
It's a massive question.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
It's a huge one. I think just engaging people and making it the norm, I think, is a good thing, and getting people to be brave enough in organizations to look at the structure of how that organization works, starting small and maybe thinking about what they could change that would improve things, and then working up from there, and having a different culture that thinks first about the environment, thinks first about sustainability, and making people brave enough to take those small steps and to get the ball rolling on projects, because we've all got to take responsibility. So I think we just need a different mindset and a different culture, really.
Yeah, I would echo that. We were at a conference actually in Bristol a few months ago, and this lady came up to say, "Oh, thank you so much for creating these films, because I'm considered a tree hugger in my company because I'm the only one who thinks like me, and I'm the only one." And she was really happy to find a group of people who actually could give her some energy and some momentum and some support, because she was completely on her own in this company, and everybody labeled her as this tree hugger. I think that, as you say, it's changing the norms. When I first walked into WWF, actually, it was a funny story. I remember like opening the cupboards, and there was just a mountain of Tupperware that just fell out, because that was just normal. It was not acceptable to kind of, just buy your lunch in a kind of disposable way that you normally would. And the way that WWF does everything considers the environment first. And it was just a real pleasure to come into an organization like that, whereas I've been in advertising before, where you kind of everything is disposable. So it's about changing the culture within the organizations that you're with, but also just being a positive agent for change, to show people that it's possible and that it actually can be, a positive journey as well. Being a positive role model, I think, is really, really important, especially as you're global leaders, and a lot of people look to the UK for models that they can follow. So I think that's super important. And also just having more sessions where you're talking to experts and being okay with not knowing everything. I mean, with biodiversity and nature, there's so many aspects to take into. Nobody's an expert in everything. So it's just being vulnerable and really understanding that this is a journey that everybody has to go on, and maybe starting small. Some of the key areas we're asking people to look at are deforestation and water, for example, and food, like being conscious about the food that you guys serve at events and in your canteens and that kind of thing. It's just a total change of culture. And as Tony Juniper said, there's been this, I can't remember the exact words he used, but there's been a assumption that the destruction of nature is inevitable of business. We need to change that mindset completely now, because as everybody has done that, we can now see, thanks to the science we have, the cumulative effect of that has meant that we are at risk of destabilizing the whole planet. And I think that's the understanding that we got here to it in an accidental way. Nobody realized this was going to happen. But now we need to do some serious backpedaling.
Yeah, fully understand. Okay, so there's a couple of questions on the chat which I'd like to bring in. The question from Anders Lehr. Yeah, I don't know if we could bring that onto the screen. Clearly, we faced some distractions recently from other world events. Rhiannon, I don't know if you want to comment on that one.
Yeah, this is obviously, it's really difficult to talk about the environment when there are people losing their lives. So absolutely agree. It's hard to really kind of, well, other than agree with your sentiment. I mean, for example, there are lots of WWF organizations who are no longer able to work in certain countries because of the political stance of the governments. And so that sets nature conservation back as well. We also know food security has been a major issue since the invasion of Ukraine from Russia, as they are one of the major agriculture providers, I guess, in the world. So we know that food security has been massively threatened by the war. So yeah, it's not just nature conservation, it's also food security for the rest of the world. So yes, agree with that comment wholeheartedly.
I agree as well, and it's tragic and sad. Destruction, fires, bombs is releasing carbon into the environment, but there's little we can do. But completely agree with that statement. But we must work towards trying to make it better, really.
Yeah. And maybe it's an example of where the historical dependence on states or individuals with positions of power over the flow of natural resources has been a reason for conflict in the past. So maybe it just shows that by moving to a new model that's less dependent upon fossil fuels, it could be a way of taking away a driver for conflict. Maybe that's also a relevant point. Perhaps it's more of a comment, I think, than the question from Phil in the chat around 80% of travel and tourism depends upon nature and conservation. I think that's a great example of where there's actually a financial case for preserving nature.
Yeah, and a lot of the insurance companies, like reinsurance companies, are actually investing in, for example, coral reef restoration, or insuring coral reefs, because the whole economy of that area is dependent on the tourism of that. So they're actually, how do you insure a coral reef? It's some really fascinating science and fascinating calculations that are happening. One of the scary things actually when I came into WWF was not a question of can we save the coral reefs of the world, it's which ones we can save. And I was shocked by that, because I started, 5 years ago. I was thinking, oh my goodness, they're actually having to decide which coral reefs we can save and which ones are just kind of, it was quite shocking.
Very sad.
Yeah.
Now we're coming towards the end of this. Oh, sorry, Hilary, please.
I was just going to add that engaging communities in looking after their wildlife. I was involved with filming a Scarlet Macaw project. These communities can make money by protecting their wildlife and their wildplace. It's a new economy, so it's a win-win in those situations.
Now we're coming towards the end of our scheduled time. We've got just about another 10 minutes, just over 10 minutes left. What I'd like to do is to give an opportunity. I know certainly within the sustainability, that those within the PMI have an interest in sustainability. I know there's a strong interest in going beyond. We've screened one film today. I'll certainly be pushing within the PMI for opportunities to bring you in to screen the others in the series, and I'm sure many of my colleagues will be very interested to see those. Rhiannon, for many of the people in the audience, they will be representing their corporations as employees or consultants. How would they go about arranging screening of these films if they would like to do so within their own groups?
Yeah, they're free to screen, so we would be delighted to help if necessary. I think probably in the chat there was a link that saveourwildisles.org.uk/business has some guides on how to organize a screening, so guides on how to set them up if you haven't done a screening before. There's also an opportunity to register your potential screening, so we can help provide a speaker, or else just help concept the event as well. There's us from WWF National Trust and RSPB. We monitor the inbox frequently to kind of help. So we've been doing that to numerous organizations. So we're just basically hoping that people will take this message and it'll inspire other screenings within other businesses, because we really see a lot of impact from people kind of bringing it in and getting their own colleagues to talk about it, and kind of finding a crew of people who are interested in these issues. So yes, they're totally free to use. I know Silverback would be happy to support doing some screenings as well, and some talks afterwards. So just reach out and let us know if we can be of any help.
Yeah. And of course, anyone can just contact me as well as through the experiences of engaging with Rhiannon and Hilary and the team. Happy to share those contacts and experiences. What I'd like to do, just a sort of final part of the session, is perhaps give you an opportunity for your final thoughts. What's the single thing you'd both like the audience to take away from this session, in terms of just a single powerful message that they can take back to reflect on in the coming days and weeks?
I think, don't forget to engage with wildlife and wild places. It's really good for you. It's good for your well-being. It's good for your mind. It's good for your health. And I think the more you engage, the more you care, the more you want to do things, and the more you you understand what you can do, what small things you can do, and just don't wait. Just take action. Don't wait for the government. Just get involved.
Great.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think every single individual has a lot of agency, and a lot of people we speak to don't even realize the amount of power that they can have. I mean, just look, Stuart, you managed to, organize this screening just through your personal passion. Every single person on this call is interested in the topic. Stepping into that agency, I think, in whatever way you can, looking into where, for example, your pensions are invested is a very easy step. That a lot of people kind of forget. It's not just your physical footprint or your carbon footprint, it's also your financial footprint. What you're doing with your money, which brands you support, which brands you veto, which brands you, like what you're buying on a day-to-day level, is just asking those awkward questions. When you're in a restaurant, say, I was in a restaurant the other day and I asked them about the salmon, whether it was responsibly caught, and they didn't know. Even the chef didn't know. He said, I think it's from Tesco or something like that. And I was just thinking, okay, well, that's not exactly the question I was looking for. But just the fact that you're asking questions and choosing a vegetarian option on a menu or a vegan also sends a really good signal to the people who are kind of sourcing goods in whatever small restaurant you're in, cafe. All of these things do send good signals to say that the world is changing and that we want to be part of this positive future. And just remembering it can actually be really positive as well, because we are building something better than we have today, and that's always a good thing. Like you said earlier, a lot of the young people don't really realize what we have lost. Like my kids used to get excited if they saw one butterfly, and I'd be thinking, oh my goodness, it's just one butterfly. They're like, Mommy, there's a butterfly in our garden. And I'm just like, oh my. So yeah, I think realizing we have, well, I say we because I've been in the UK for so many years now, but there's so many great poems and stories written about our nature, the nature here. There's so many different ways to get involved. I find it really inspiring every day. And a lot of the films actually that were shortlisted in this Global Sustainability Film Awards are showing some of these amazing people who are, rescuing sea turtles from the eggs on the beach and moving them up so they don't kind of get taken away by the sea. Like there's so many inspiring stories that are out there. It's just, picking something that's passionate, it makes you smile and sticking with it and then talking about it to change the narrative and change the way that people are engaging with this so that it can be something positive as well. Like that's my main. What someone said here, you revive your courage for a future every day. Yeah, exactly.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you. Thank you to Hilary and to Rhiannon for the session today, and for all the wonderful work that you've been doing over many years that's got us to this point of being able to celebrate the fantastic work through the films.
Just one, someone was asking for the link again in the chat, so I'll just repeat it if it's helpful. It's saveourwildisles.org.uk/business. But as Stuart said, they'll be very happy to supply that afterwards.
Yeah, in fact, and it is just still in the chat, so you can just scroll up through the chat. There it is within the chat itself.
And just look at the at work section or put a /business on the end, and then you'll find all the information you need on all the films.
Great.
Just on behalf of Hilary and I, thank you so much, Stuart and the PMI, for hosting us. It's been an absolute pleasure today, and thank you for your interest in this. You guys really have such a massive reach and are involved in so many different projects. It's so inspiring to see you raising the profile of nature within your organization. So thank you.
Yep, a big thank you. Thank you very much. And if you want to see Wild Isles, I think it's still on iPlayer, as is Saving Our Wild Isles, so you can have your own dip into British wildlife.
Great. Thank you.